Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Genetic Genius Podcast. I am so thrilled to have my guest, Iona, here today. We're going to be talking all about breath work. So if that's something that you're curious about and wanting to learn more, you're in the right place. Welcome, Iona.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yay, me too. Breath work is an amazing subject and topic. I love breath work. So I'm excited to help the listeners understand it a little bit better and how it can be. I basically think it's life-changing.
Yeah, I'm excited. I always love the opportunity to talk about breath work and demystify it and sort of take it out of this kind of abstract, is it yoga? Is it meditation? Why would I be doing this? What's it even useful for? Is that some kind of crazy woo spiritual thing? Because I like to say I'm got a twinkle of woo in me, but I'm also very practical. And I've seen so many ways that breath work for me and also with my clients and with all the users of my app, they've just found it such a practical and kind of magical tool for helping them just feel more brave and bright in their life. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yay, me too. That's great. I love that. A twinkling of woo. That's wonderful. And so tell me, and the listeners a little bit about yourself before we dive deep into the breathwork process. And, tell us how you got into breathwork, what kind of sparked your interest, your story behind it.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Iona, and I'm the co-founder of the Soul Breathwork app, and I'm also the bestseller of Ghost: Why Perfect Women Shrink. But my journey or fascination with breathwork and really just kind of body-based and visualization-based healing stemmed from my own journey. So I was someone who, for basically 20 years of my life, from about 11 to 29, I was someone who really struggled with what most people would diagnose as an eating disorder and depression. And that was very much my life. It was something that I struggled with pretty invisibly because I was, and I find a lot of people in the world like this, on the surface, it actually looked great. I was playing for my country in Scotland. I'm from Scotland originally, so I was representing my country. I was recruited to play field hockey in the US, straight A student, worked for Google first year out of school. Like, it was all looking good, but on the inside I was really struggling deeply. And by the time I got to 29, I really hit a rock bottom and was looking for something, anything that would help me. And I'd had a couple of experiences with counseling and therapy that had felt very alienating. And I'm not saying that's always the case, but at all. But it was for me. And so those didn't really feel like options when I was finally ready and looking for help. And so I came across inner work. I really did a lot of self-healing, and breath work was one of the modalities that really helped me not only learn how to feel, but really wake up my body as well, because I was quite numb. And some people exist on the opposite spectrum. Some people are perhaps a lot more anxious. But as someone who was more trending towards sadness and depression, I was pretty numb and shut down. And breathwork was something that really helped me regulate that and sort of bring myself back up. And so it was instrumental in me healing. And then the cool thing about once you do a certain amount of healing is that you shift over from that survival to thriving. And now I use breath work for things like creativity and focus and being brave, building my business and working through some of the stuff that can come up with that. It's just a really powerful tool for both healing and then also, I like to call it burning bright in your life. So I think it can hit both of those in really powerful ways. So that's my story, and that's why I don't share anything that I am a practitioner of. And breathwork's one of these things that I've just seen has helped me so profoundly and has helped so many people that I've worked with just burn brighter in their life.
I love that, Iona. And, I like the different pieces that you said too, because people can really relate to the same story. Maybe not the breathwork piece because they haven't found it, or maybe they have, but, about being in this place where have an image, of how you are facing the world. Like, this is me, and I'm in this perfect reality. Everything is going great, but in the inside, they do have that turmoil, and it starts to show up in different ways in their life, whether that can be through depression or anxiety or worry, or maybe it's a health issue where it could be, a digestive disorder like IBS, or maybe they have a skin rash. When the body is suppressed, it starts to let us know that things are not quite in the well world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to think of it as repressed pain or unexpressed struggle manifests physically in the body. I'm a big believer in that. I know for
Hmm.
me, my sort of invisible, the pressure of what I was dealing with became so symptomatic. I would always have, I think in the US you call them canker sores. I always view them as ulcers, but like my
Hmm.
mouth would just break out in those. Um, Totally lost my period for nearly a decade.
Mm.
Um, Hair on my body, colds, like deathly colds every few months.
Mm.
It all just became very, very, very symptomatic. And similarly, clients I've worked with, it would manifest as like pain in the body, or like you said, those kind of digestive experiences, especially I think in women, like all of that
Mhm.
embodied pressure. And then there's so much issues with much so many issues with the stomach and the body and
Mhm.
processing and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know about you, but I used to think that that was weird and that that wasn't real. Like the
Maybe
idea
not
that
me.
that emotions could make you, or lack of emotions or lack of connection to yourself, like a real meaningful and connection to yourself, could
Mhm.
manifest as physical illness. But then being on the other side of it as someone now who is rarely ill, almost never gets canker sores, has loads more energy, um, like it can't really be denied.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so true. And I like that piece that you brought up, because a lot of people don't associate it with an actual physical ailment, right? And I laughed because, of course, from my perspective as a doctor, I see it in my patients, but then they don't
Yeah.
realize it. And I think a lot of people, patients in particular, they have lost the touch of their just body in general, like how it communicates, the relationship with their body, how their body can manifest as an illness. And here, and the messages is like they just have tuned out. It's kind of like if your cell phone has stopped ringing for eternity, right? Or not
Hmm.
texting, it's been texting you for 10 years, and it's like, okay, fine, I'm not texting anymore, I'm over you. Right? And then it starts to revolt.
Yes. Yep. And that was so true for me because I'd refused to be hungry for almost 20 years. Like I had completely suppressed all of that
Mm.
interoception, like that inner communication that the body goes through. I just numbed it out so much. And the way I often describe it to people is your mind is computer like in the way that it operates. And I like to think of the soul as more like star like it's kind of magical in a way. It's like can't
Mm.
really be explained, but the physical body is the most human part of you. And at a certain point, if the pressure of the mind or the soul is kind of lost or quiet, it really starts, you start to feel it. Like the body really becomes symptomatic, and you can't override being a human being. Like I see this all the time in people who I work with who have burnout or are really stressed or are struggling to focus or are just chronically looping in things. It's like you cannot bypass your human experience.
Mm.
No matter
Yes.
how like no matter how much you try to think your way out of things, you cannot bypass. And there's also so much wisdom in here that you're, like you said, just we're chronically disconnected from.
Hmm. Yeah, so I loved everything that you said there, and it is so true. It's like we can't disconnect, even. And I think there's some worlds, maybe like in a piece of trauma, where you're like, okay, I'm disconnecting from my body because I need to process this trauma in a different way. But then there has to be the piece where you kind of come back in, right? And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm ready, I'm here. And so that gives us a great segue into us like talking about like breath work. Like, so what is breath work? I think that's kind of like a mystery thing. Like, myself, I was thinking about it before our conversation today. I was like, okay, so if I had never heard of it, what would be the ideas that would come up in my mind? I was thinking about like, oh, is it something like, heavy breathing, soft breathing, all these different things where people might not understand. So I'd love for you to describe it for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing I always like to say is breath is your body's language. So
Mm,
when we do breath work, we are speaking the body's language. And like you were just saying, that can look very different, but it can look like a variation of depth and intensity of breathing patterns and holds, 5 minutes. It could be 45 to an hour, depending on the kind of experience that you're having. But because you're speaking the body's language, you're doing, I'll say, one of two things. You're either shifting your state from one to another.
mm,
So a really simple way that we say that on the app is doing a state change session. If you're stressed, this one will shift you into more chillness. If you're feeling really slumped and low, this one will boost you up. I like to think of them as like anchors and
mm-hmm,
spark plugs. So there's ways that
mm-hmm.
we can spark our system up. There's ways that we can drop our system down. So even from what I was describing earlier about being someone who trends, even now having done loads of healing, trend more down towards the sad or numb feelings. Someone like me can really benefit from more of those boosts, whereas someone
Mm-hmm.
perhaps who's up more in fight or flight or associates more with feeling like an anxious person anchors to ground you. So shifting states is a beautiful use case for breath work. And then I also, my favorite, is facilitating long soul sessions or breathwork
Mm,
journeys where we go
mhm,
deep into the body and layer on visualization to go for like a deep healing, sometimes psychedelic experience. And those are more longer sessions. I'm hosting one on Friday, a live free one that people can join, where you get to combine both your body with some amazing music and some visualization to really like go in and work those inner
mm.
unconscious layers and perhaps shift, change, heal, see yourself differently, really turn that body brain on and see what's going on in there. So I hope helpful. But I view breathwork as speaking the body's language and turning your body into a brain for either grounding, transformation, healing.
Oh, great explanation. And I like the different aspects that you described of it because it can be used in different ways. And especially your explanation of it being in this grounding way, or maybe you need it as an energizing way, depending on what your energy, and that could be different from moment to moment, right? But I think in the
Yeah.
overall, your tendencies, depending on what you are, like example can be as we're moving into the holidays, maybe you have anxiety with travel, and I think a lot of people, especially with where we are moving in and out of the pandemic, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be on this plane with all these people. And I think breath work is a really, that's how I like to use it, is a way to really ground myself and to help me get back into my body where the thoughts I might've been thinking of were running rampant.
Yeah, totally. I love that visual as well. It's like whenever you can feel either like your head running away with you or shutting off, just taking even like 3 to 5 minutes to bring it all back into your body is such a vital and cool thing that you can do. And for me, for holidays, the topic of conversation that always comes up, which is an interesting one, is people are both very excited to see their family and then also not. Because
Terrified.
often like often what happens is because our family know us a particular way, sometimes we'll just go and fall into perhaps default ways of being, stuff that we've actually moved past in our real world, but
Mm-hmm.
our system kind of just falls back in and we get impatient or we get frustrated or we get overwhelmed by being around people, and that's where I think breathwork comes into its own as well, because there's so many ways that you can do it that's invisible. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
always saying, like, do like the one I always tell people, like if you've never done breathwork before, just practice resonance breathing. And resonance breathing is a 5-second inhale through your nose, a 5-second exhale, could be through your nose or your mouth, whatever you're more comfortable with. Slowing
Mm-hmm.
your breath down, 6 breaths a minute, sinks the heart down, chills the nervous system out, And just being able to do that, it's invisible. You can do it in the presence of your family or your friends or whoever it is. And
Mm-hmm.
that's like vote cast for being a chill human being or a more chill human being than you
Right.
might have been otherwise. I'm always like resonance breathing, and then imagine falling into observation mode. Imagine taking
Mm.
just like one big step back from the experience that you're having, settle into observation mode, and see if that just creates a bit of a gap between you and what's going on. And perhaps you would make different choices or take a beat before you like dive into the fray or start being, I don't know, activating your wounded inner child or whatever it is that comes
Right.
online.
Yes, I really like that example of the family dynamic, because I think a lot of people do have those different situations, and it can be with all the different family relatives, right? You could have some that could be triggering, some that could be loving. And like you said, going into that with maybe you have changed, and we hope that we're all evolving at some level over time. But I think that using the breath work, what a great way to really, and also this, how you mentioned the like stepping back as the observer, right? And like, oh, is that particular person triggering me? How am I going to respond? Taking that breath before that response comes in, instead of like reaching for something, that the knife on the table or something across
Right.
your family member.
Right, exactly. The police have to come on Christmas.
Right.
Right,
Yeah. Not good.
exactly. Right. I think something I always like to think about with breath work and why I like it as a kind of more, it's an active tool, and it's a choice that you can make to have a better experience at any given time. Whether that's a better experience that's literally just like not reacting or not doing something that you then have to feel shameful about afterwards. Even if
Mm,
it just brings you down to net neutral, that's a win in my book. And the
mm-hmm.
same thing of like, if you're someone who tends to like just disappear and get so overwhelmed, and then you come back with a story that, oh my god, I missed everything and everyone thinks I'm not friendly. Like that's when I used to get a lot, like everyone thinks I'm not friendly because I just like can't
Mm,
be there.
mm-hmm.
Breath work is something that like if I can ground into my body, breathe, show myself that I'm safe, perhaps I can be there, and then I don't have to deal with the secondhand shame of the way that I was, because I see this so often. I mean, I've experienced it myself, and I see it so
Mm-hmm.
often in my clients. It's either like we're there, we get swept up, we're not a grounded soul, we just get all swept up in it, or we completely take ourselves out of the experience, and then we start having feelings about the feelings.
Right. Exactly.
And I'm all like and so I'm always encouraging people that like you are the most powerful person in your life. You can
Mm,
make choices at any given time to have even just like a degree to the left, slightly different experience. And breathwork in the moment is one of those things that can be so powerful. And then when you're out of the fray and back in your own space, a longer session for you to really work through and heal some of the reasons why you're feeling so intensely in the first place. That's
mm-hmm.
that beautiful, like deep healing as well that
Right.
we all need to do.
Exactly. Yes, great examples. And I like how you said too that we can be in this place of like the acknowledgement piece, right? Where we can have the moment where we are tuning down, and then we can be in the neutrality, right? So if we're in that neutral place, it can really help us to just take a little bit of the edge off, so to speak, which I
Yes.
think is a great place to be, especially with the patients that I work with that have a lot of anxiety. That's where I see that they have the most effects and the most results is a better word, I think, where they're able to just like, okay, I can just come back into my body, like you said, come in and really just like ground in, reset. It's like a quick reset. And so when we're talking about breath work, I love that this is kind of great segue too. How does it work specifically with the nervous system? Because I know, we have our fight or flight mode. So how does breath work then move us out of that resetting the nervous system and into that place of calm, peace, harmony?
Yeah, I love this question. So here's the way that I like to think about the nervous system. When we are feeling safe, so we're in the part of our nervous system or our autonomic nervous system that feels safe, we are having thoughts that start with I can. So I can do this, or I want to do that. We have
Mm.
choice and we have ability. So we're present and we have choice and we have ability. Like you and me here right now, I can speak, I want to, I have things to share. I'm feeling present. So
Mm-hmm.
that's ideally where we want to make the majority, not ideally where we want to make the majority. This is kind of where we want to make all of our life decisions. All of our moves is from this place of I can and I will, because we have agency and sovereignty, and that's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
However, when our nervous system gets activated, and I just want to, this is the way that I think about the nervous system. Other people have more scientific definitions, but this is the way that I look at it. The nervous system is your am I going to die filter. So it
Mm.
is scanning the environment for danger or safety, danger or safety, danger or safety, and responding in that way. And depending on your life experiences, things that have happened to you, conditioning, trauma, that system, that filtering system may be slightly off. People say dysregulated. It's not my favorite word because it
Mm-hmm.
implies brokenness. And we're not
Right.
broken, we're just beautifully adapted to our life experiences. But that
Mm.
is what is happening. And so if our nervous system sees something as danger, we will mobilize into that, what is commonly referred to as fight or flight. And the way that I like to think about it is we shift from that I can and I want to state from I must. So, and if you're
Mm.
listening to this, that feeling of urgency or speed, or we need to resolve this right now, that's what gets labeled as like, I'm a chronically anxious person. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that, you can call it that if you want to, but you're just over mobilized, and you're hanging out in the part of your nervous system that is responding to a lot of danger all the time. So you've now
Mm.
shifted into that place. And then for someone like me, or historically, where I was more in that shutdown, hibernation, numb state space in my autonomic nervous system, which is that I can't and I don't
Mm.
want to.
Right.
So there's actually very little energy in that place. And that's where people will say, I have depression or I am depressed. And you can call it that if you want to, but the way that I like to think about it is I'm just hanging out in this part of my nervous system, which is collapsed and lacking in energy. And so at any given time, on any given day, we are shifting we are the our we're tracking, our system is doing it but below conscious thought. We're not thinking about this, but our system is tracking our environment and then either mobilizing or shutting down on our behalf based on, again, our life experiences, what we have learned to be true about ourselves and the world. And so again, the thing about breath work and how this interacts with the nervous system is that if we can recognize that we are in that I must place, or if we can recognize that we are in that I can't place, we have information. We don't have a permanent state. We don't have an identity. We have information about where we're at. And then short term, we can use something to bring us back into that place of I can. And then long term, we can do healing around what in my life, what in my life experiences, what perhaps has happened to me in the past, which has shifted the way that my nervous system responds to the world. And then over time, we can heal that. So in the
Mm-hmm.
moment, we can come back to safety. And then long term, it's more that reshaping of our nervous system over time so that we can feel more in the I can space more often and more able
Yeah.
to return to it when we leave it.
Right. Oh, that's great explanation. And so true. I really like the way that you described it. It's like we're just scanning all the time, everything around us. And that can be the nervous system or anything of our needs, right? Whether we're needing something to maybe you feed your body when you're nervous, or maybe you starve your body when you're nervous. It's that whatever the responses are. And we're always changing and shifting, like you said. And I think that's a really great way because with breath work, we are breathing in and out. It's like part of that up and down cycle, like everything is
Mm-hmm.
coming in, and it's not just, I mean, breath itself from the physiological perspective has so many benefits in the body, right? But when we use it or think about it from the emotional place, then it's like, to me, it's a whole nother place. Like the hormones, how are the hormones affected? How is our cortisol affected? When we see how it really affects us, and there's tons of studies that have been done on how breath work actually has the physiological effects of it, how stress can be helped with breath work. And I think for people that know that they're maybe charged or triggered in certain
Mhm.
circumstances when they're in that flight or fight mode, whatever it is for them, I think that's like the key for listeners out there, especially, like, oh yeah, that's me, right? That's the experience that I am having throughout the day. And for another great tool I like too is having kind of like a little breath journal, or some kind of journal that you're using if you're noticing that you're during certain times of day, you're like, oh yeah, I'm really breathing a lot differently in this moment. And then thinking to yourself, okay, well, what happened? Why was it? What was it? Was it something that
Yeah.
I ate, like a food sensitivity? Or was it I put myself in a circumstance where I was triggered by a relationship? I mean, there's so many different ways that your body is triggered, and I think that can be helpful for learning how your nervous system even works.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Like curiosity above all else, like judgment to
Hmm.
the side. Why am I like this, to the side? Just like being able to sit into that place of curiosity and recognition of patterns, because that's the other
Hmm.
thing. We like think we're so complicated human beings, and we are, but we're
Right.
very creature-like and we're very pattern-based. And
Hmm.
the more that we can become into awareness of that, the better. And
Right.
the other thing I wanted to mention is like nervous system regulation. I work with it a lot, and in myself too. I work with it a lot with clients who are business owners, who
Hmm.
or are people that are like, I work with a woman who's, I'm helping her write her book right now. And
Mm.
so much nervous system and fear, because again, it's like, will I die? So much fear comes up around being seen, like being
Mm.
seen as someone, being visible in your business, like believing in yourself, believing that you are someone who can write and publish a book. Like I've been there. I talk about like
Mm.
breathwork was one of those things. Inner work was one of those things that allowed me to get to the finish line when I saw so many people stop. And we wonder why we hit these walls in our life, or why we don't do the things that we say that we want to. On some level, we are deeply scared of dying. We're
Right.
so like, because that's that, like we're back in the tribe. Like if I'm
Mm.
seen, I'm vulnerable. If I stick out too much, I'm cast out. If I'm appearing weak in some kind of way, they're going to
Mm.
leave me behind. Like we're just imprinting all of these very ancient sensations and feelings and stories onto our modern world. And so I think
Hmm.
that's really important to know about breathwork too, is it's a beautiful thing for someone who's healing, like deep healing, like it was for me. It's great for that. And it's also an incredibly powerful and creative tool for being brave in your life. Because if you can regulate your nervous system when you are doing, like coming on a podcast, maybe for some
Right.
people is a very, maybe for some people is a very thing.
Hmm.
Chill. Public speaking, like chill so you can be
Hmm.
there and burn really bright. It's so applicable. Um, like I work with someone who's the CEO of a startup, and he has to go on sales calls and sell to clients and those kind of things. Breathwork. It's like it's a brilliant tool for being able to show
Hmm.
up as the best version of you in situations that could make your system feel very stressed out. So it's so great for healing, but it's also huge for performance too.
Yeah. Oh, I 100% agree with that. I've used it a lot for all those things that you said for writing my book.
Cool.
Definitely, as a way for me. I use it, I think from the writing perspective, I use it as a lot to open up my mind as like a download, so I can really,
Yes.
just release all of the junk in there. I don't know if you remember the movie I can't remember what the title was, but he's talking to God and he goes in and it's just like this file cabinet that like explodes, like, and that's all his mind. And that's how when I think about when I use breath work, is like I have all these file cabinets in my mind of just things that are taking up useless space in the moment.
Yeah.
And so breath work allows me to clear the clutter, right? And to be in that space of this is what I need right now to help me be the most successful for this project in front of me. And public speaking, of course, is huge. I do a lot of that. And every time I get like nervous and sweaty, as I'm moving into that adrenaline place, I'm like, okay, yeah, I got this. I can breathe. I can do this. I've done it before. But every
Yeah.
time, it's that same thing. It's like, oh my God, they're going to hate me this time, or whatever thought goes through my mind.
Totally. Which it's such a normal thing. And I don't like to claim that breathwork makes you immune, because again, we can't bypass the human
Right.
experience.
We have
But it
emotions all the time.
yes, yes. It's more in the experience of them. Am I swept up in them? Do I
Mm,
believe everything that I'm thinking and feeling? Or can I find myself in that I can present space? Because
right.
if you are breathing, like the fastest way to be present is to get into your body, because
Mhm.
your body it's sensual. So it is sense based. So if you are breathing, or if you are seeing, or if you're noticing, or you're feeling, you are more in the present than your mind, which is the ultimate time traveler. Like it can
Right.
go forward, it can go backward, it can go all around block universe. I'm obsessed with the block universe right now. The
Mhm.
idea that everything is happening like all at once and has already
Yeah.
happened and all that kind of stuff. It can go anywhere. And so
Mhm.
the mind is hard to control. The body, the breath is easier to work with. Anything that you can do to bring yourself back into the present, whether you're triggered by a family member, trying to sit down to write but you're creatively blocked, like all of these things can be at least met a bit more powerfully with
Mhm.
breathing.
Right. Yes. Oh, great. I love that you said that. And when we're talking about the nervous system too, I always think about adrenal fatigue, adrenal burnout, and how can breath work be used to help with that burnout, especially as we're moving into 2023. It's like we're moving to this new year. We all have this image about like, I want to have the best year yet, right? The best year
Sure.
ever, right? Moving, and especially if you're in this space, like, oh God, I don't have the energy. I'm burned out. So what happens when there's two parts to this question? One, what happens when we're to the body, to the breath, when we're in the burnout stage? And then how does breath work help us to move out of that burnout stage into a place of like energy, like energizing the body?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way that I think about burnout is when we've been in a place of chronic stress or feeling swamped for too long, like
Mm-hmm.
just for too long. So that can, again, it can look like many different things. It can look like the combination of life things, whether it's family pressure, work related pressure. I think a lot of people, and rightly so, I think experience or relate burnout to stress related to their work. And
Mm-hmm.
often because it feels like in work, they don't have control. So there's that degree of performing or having to prove that you're good enough, or making sure that you're being seen a particular way. And so some of the agency that we might feel in our life, we just start overriding. And so we
Right.
just get used to this feeling of stress. We don't even register as stress, we just register as this is my life. And that, like over time and perhaps over months, or like acutely, or perhaps over years,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately leaves us in this place where we have fried we have fried ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
um
Exactly.
and 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 the thing about, which is beautiful about the body, is that it has the capacity to heal. 100%, we have the capacity to heal. We have the capacity to reshape our nervous system. These options are available to us. And also there's a reality to the fact that if like our system is just kind of like a bone as well. Like when a bone breaks, it needs less pressure. It often
Mm,
needs a bit more stillness. It needs to be held for a while it heals. And burnout is not something that can just be like, I'll just throw in some breath work on top of my really stressful life, and I'm then I'm going to heal.
Right. Ding.
So then it's like, ding, here we go. So maybe doing some, like, sure, on a spot level treatment, which is never really the way that you want to go. Breathing a little bit more might help. But what you really, I think, need to look at with burnout is reduction of stress. Like, there's a reality to that, which even then I think can bring up a lot of really interesting conversations for people around worth and around fear and around who am I when I'm not stressed. That was for me. It's like, well, if I'm stressed and I'm working hard, then I'm perfect and I'm great and people will see me as successful. Who am I if I do less? So a huge part of burnout in my eyes is believing that you actually have ownership and power to change some of the stressors in your life. And I think so often we'll outsource that to something external, like my job made me do this, or my boss made me do this. And that may well be true, but if we're really caring about ourselves and our system and our life and our body, we have to become a bit more active defenders of that. So I think one of the big things around breathwork is I do need to reduce stress or pressure, and what does that look like? And then pairing that also with breathing, nervous system regulation, and not just, I'm saying breathing because, like, I love breath work, but movement of your body, gentle movement of your body, walking, being outside. Like, again, we are creatures, we are supposed to be out there. Our homes
not
should be
in our
comfortable.
room.
Right, exactly. So I think all of those come into play. But I think burnout is not just something that happens to us. We are often believing that it has to be that way. And so there's some, I think, healing and resiliency and taking of power back into yourself to kind of push back against the system, which is a huge part of healing burnout too. I don't view it as just a medical issue. I view it more as a symptom of self or lack of self.
Yeah, so true. You hit so many key points there. And, adrenal burnout is part of that stress component. And you hit it right on. And you have to address the stress. You can have all the Band-Aids in the world that you want. But if you don't really address, and that's how I talk to patients about root cause of disease all the time. If you really don't address the root of the problem, you're never going to move beyond it, move through it, heal it. It's just like you just put it back on the shelf. You're like, oh, I took out the horror chapter, right? Then you're like, okay, that was awful. I'm going to put it back up there and I'm not going to read it again. Maybe next week. Right. And breathwork can be a great tool, and it is fabulous for helping to reduce stress. But like you said, there does need to be the other components, what lifestyle components, addressing the stress, nutrition, supplements, maybe genetics, like all the pieces that you can look at with your body to really understand it. And I think that because it's not like termed officially, like in the medical world, then I think that people don't feel like they have the same recognition because it's not able to be like diagnosed necessarily. I can diagnose it from my standpoint, of course, but from the traditional medical model, it's not. This diagnosis is different. There's not one. And so people feel like left out, like, oh my gosh, all the things we just mentioned throughout this whole conversation today can be part of that picture. You're like, okay, well, I'm have all those things going on. I have the anxiety, the worry, the stress. Maybe it's the eating. Maybe it's how I work with my family. Maybe it's my finances, all of it together. And you're like, I just have no energy to do anything. Or maybe you're on the other side and you're so wired that you just can't even like sleep, which that's the other side of the coin. That I have patients both ways, like no energy and then so wired that everything becomes this like a cyclone, right? It's like moving energy consistently and they have no break. And then if they try to move out of the cyclone, they don't know what to do. Like you mentioned, it's like they can't relate to that non-cyclone life. So it's like the cyclone sucks them back in, like the Tasmanian devil or something.
Right. The way I like to think about that is we all have a home away from home. So
Mm,
you think that the way that we would feel, we would want to feel is like in that I can space, but we
mm-hmm.
become very accustomed to living at an Airbnb, like whether that is stress cyclone Airbnb or numb
Mm-hmm.
shutdown Airbnb, we can get very accustomed to homes within our nervous system. And so, and that's also, I think, I love that we're talking about burnout, because I don't view it as a medical condition. I believe that there's like elements of it, obviously, because,
Right.
obviously, but so much of this is it's a relationship with self, because
Mm.
we wouldn't be doing all of these things if perhaps we didn't think we had to. And then where did we learn that we had to? Our conditioning, beliefs, identity, our sense of self. And where do we
Mm.
learn that? Growing up, childhood, conditioning. And where do we learn that? From our parents. And how regulated were they? Probably not. And like
Mm.
this is the thing.
Mm,
It's not
exactly.
just a medical thing.
Right.
It's a soul thing. It's a who am I identity thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think so many of us get stuck in these places where we're like, I don't want to be this way. I don't like being stressed, but we're scared to not be, like, we're scared of who we are if we're not these things.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that's like, say even the word burnout, like you said, necessarily can't be diagnosed with it.
Right.
I like to look at patterns and trends. So I feel like during lockdown, trauma became something that became rose up into the collective consciousness as something that everyone has, which I
Right.
believe. I'm not saying that rolling my eyes, like it was like normalized. Like a few years
Yes.
ago, no one was talking about trauma. Everyone was talking about trauma. And then I feel like over the last couple of years, burnout has now risen up into the collective consciousness as
Mm-hmm.
this is something that I feel. And I was even looking at stats about this because I'm actually teaching a soul breathwork intensive on burnout in January. And
Mm-hmm.
like the number, like you can just look at the stats, which is fascinating. I think it's something like 80+% of Gen Z associate with having burnout, whereas it's only like 50% of baby boomers. But which again is
Mm-hmm.
like references, I think, where the
Mm-hmm.
collective consciousness sits. And then the other part, which I'm seeing again trending, is neurodivergence. So this
Mm.
idea that we all have, or that there are people who are typical or atypical. But again, the way that I look at that is all of these are just different expressions of humanity that are now feeling or finding that they actually are allowed to be in the world, and then they're not broken. But I just think, but if I look at these all, trauma, burnout, neurodivergence, different
Mm.
experiences of the world, all of this is belief stuff. Like all of this is identity. All of this is who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I like this? And so for me, as someone who is obsessed with inner work, I think it's great. Like I
Yeah.
think it's great that we're talking about all these things. And also I get a wee bit weary of the over medicalizing or diagnoses of any
Yeah.
of these things.
Right.
So labels are helpful, and then they can also, if they become the way where you stop, you don't get
Mm-hmm.
curious and be like, okay, and how do I
Right.
move through this?
Exactly.
Then they don't serve the purpose that I think that they were created for.
Yeah, totally. I see that's everything you said hit right on, and especially the labeling part too. I think if it allows people to become the label, like, oh, I have this, and because I have this, I can't be all the other things that I'm envisioning in my life. Like, no, I can't do that. I can't go out with you tonight. I'm blank. I can't go out to dinner. I can't go for a walk. I can't, like just what you said, the can and the can't. And so that labeling becomes the reality that the person has then created as a place to not wallow isn't the right word, that's not very nice, as a place of safety, I think is a better term. Like
Yeah.
that becomes their safety zone, right? Until, because their body says, well, if I move out of that place, everything outside of that boundary that I created is my safe land of label, right? And I think that's probably a better way to visualize it. when we're talking about all these pieces of breath work and really moving into this place of optimizing breath work for eliminating, quote unquote, eliminating burnout for 2023, how can we use the breath work as a way of like really manifesting the best life for 2023? Like, okay, what would be your like top tip, so to speak, for moving into 2023? Maybe that's using your app, which we haven't even talked about. Maybe you could talk about it with that purpose. So using how let me reframe it. How can we use breathwork and the soul app that you can talk to us about to manifest the most amazing life for 2023?
Yeah, I love this question. Also, I think it's great when you get through a podcast and you haven't spoken, because it means you're having a good conversation. But
Exactly.
yes,
Yes. Yes. I'm like, oh my
I
God, your
have
app.
no, not at all. I have the Soul Breathwork app where I have made a home for state changes, short sessions, so that you can shift from one place to another. And then also the longer, more deep healing and psychedelic sessions. It's on the App Store and you can try it free for 7 days. And also, if you're here and listening to this and it's Thursday, I actually have a live free breathwork session on Friday, which is called Gold. And to answer your question around how we use breathwork to sort of sidestep burnout and then also live a really brave life, Gold might be a really beautiful session, and we have a similar one on the app for like, I love using breath work to do journeys where we do future self visualization and future self embodiment, and sort of connect with a future version of us, and then almost take on that wisdom so that we can apply it as we're moving into 2023. As you can probably guess, I'm not a big fan of resolutions, especially ones that are created through the lens of shame. But I am a big believer in becoming the version of me who. So, and that's where like I love to pair future self work and visualizations with statements of like, I'm in the process of becoming someone who moves their body because they know it's a brain, or I'm in the process of becoming a more creative or brave person, or whatever your version of that is. So I love breathwork for that, and that's something that you can definitely explore. And then also, from sort of sidestepping burnout, the way that I look at it is, if you are more in your body, ideally it would be through breathwork and also other things, whether that is just moving more, that could be walking, it could be anything. If you are in your body more, if you're able to turn it into a brain, and if you're able to understand and just even see when you're shifting from I can to I must or I can't, you have your tells, like you have your awareness, and then it's up to you to be like a beautiful home for yourself, a beautiful protector of the valuable asset that is you, and then be able to recognize, I'm burning hot right now, and if I keep doing this is unsustainable. Similarly, if I am shut down and I'm not letting myself stay here, but kind of, I know there's things that I can do for myself. And this is the thing that I always want to drive home for people. Do not forget, you are the most powerful person in your life. You have choice at any time. I am not saying that it's always easy to make that choice. I'm not saying that at all, but I am just saying you are the most powerful person in your life. And any small move, that could be a 5-minute state change that gives you just enough to shift from where you are one rung up the ladder, or to tilt the prism 1 degree to the left so you can start looking into your life differently. You always have that choice, and you have time for that. So that, like, taking radical responsibility for your life, and being able to see even when you're burning out or might be, and then taking good care of yourself so that you can, like, we'll be having this conversation in a year's time and you'll be like, damn, I actually showed up for myself this year across the board, from a caring place, and then also as a visionary of my life too.
I love all of that, Iona. And it's so true when we show up for ourselves and in a way that is healing, a way that is loving, a way that can be transforming, a way. And I love what you said too about, resolutions, because I don't like the word either. I think they really let
Yeah.
people down, and no, and you don't feel follow through with it. But from a place of, I work with my patients in a place of like rewriting your story. What's your story going to be for 2023? What's your vision going to be? If you had an unlimited palette, like how would you paint your story? And what would you be doing differently? How do you want to do something different? Are you happy with where you are now? And it can, like you said, like how you mentioned, like the prism shifting just a moment of your time, and if you could just see with a different lens today, in the moment, in the second, in the minute, in the whole year, how would you look back? And I love to look. I was just thinking about this the other day, looking back at all the amazing things that I did this year. I was just like, wow, like I manifested that. I can't believe it. Like I traveled all over the world. I was on the cover of magazines, like all these things. And I'm a big manifester. So I was like, yes, like, but
Yeah.
I work hard, or I don't even like to use the word work. I vision with such purpose and love and reality that I can like grab it and hold it and know that I can have the reality that I want and create it, and breath work is such an amazing tool for that. And really, like for me, and I picture the cell, the DNA of the cell, and I'm thinking like, okay, if I'm energizing every cell with breath work of my reality, and each of those cells are like this, like super sponge, they're like, yeah, give me more, give me more, give me more, And so when we have that reality that
Yeah.
it feels so good to the soul, it's like, whoa, if I could just do that every moment, just a little bit, but it's like the icing on the cake, but you can eat the cake every second.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd even love that you use the word manifest, because I think that that is even a term that we're like, oh, that's so woo. We're
Right. Yes.
manifesting our life every single moment we breathe. Manifestation just means to make real. And
Right.
so, like, or I'm not saying that's the definition, but that's the way that I
Right.
look at it. Manifesting is
Yeah.
just making real things, becoming concrete and real in front of us at any given time. You're doing that whether you're consciously doing it or not. And so
Mm-hmm.
what you described is such a beautiful example of that. If I am in myself more, if I'm choosing myself more, if I am really not trying to be perfect, because we're humans, but like trying to prioritize connecting to myself and feeling that, what I'm manifesting is a direct relation of that. That's not woo, that's not weird, that's not anything. That's
Mm-hmm.
just what we're doing. And again, that comes back to that piece of who are you choosing to be at any given time? And you always have a choice to shift that if you want to.
So true. So true. Yeah. It's like manifesting is a strange word. I think it maybe not strange, but it's used a lot. And so people,
Yes.
yes. And I don't know what other word we would use instead of it, but I know that it works for me, and the word resonates with me, myself deep in, because I know, like,
Yeah.
for an example, my family's coming to visit for the holidays, and I wanted to take them on this special, like, fun tour. And I called, and they're like, oh no, we're not offering that weekend because it's a holiday weekend. I was like, oh really? And I'm like, okay. And so I hung up the phone. I said, well, I really wish they would add another tour. And then I went to book the tour for the other day, and they added it on there. And so, I mean, that's like something very simple, but when something like that happens, I recognize it too. I'm like, oh, I totally manifested
Yes.
that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's also, I love the power of noticing. It's like,
Yeah.
see, when you look at see, when you start to believe that like synchronicities are not magic and they're all meant to be, it's just so much fun to live your life. It's so much more fun to live your life. I don't know.
Yeah,
Like that's the way
exactly.
that I look at it. It's like,
Yeah, totally. Oh, I
look, I
100%
like to go
agree.
on, yeah, like everyday magic walks. I'm like, oh my
Mhm.
goodness, how magical. It
Yes.
just is so much more fun. So much more
Yes,
fun.
yes, I totally agree. Well, Iona, I know that we could talk for a long time. We've already had a great
Yeah.
conversation today. I loved it, but I want to wrap things up, and let's talk about a few things. One, how people can find you, and let's recap about how people can find the app, your wonderful meditation that's happening tomorrow. If you're listening on Thursday, it's happening Friday, December the 16th, and on 12 o'clock. I can't, you tell us the time, 12 o'clock
Yeah.
EST. Yes. And so,
Yes.
yes, tell us about all those great things.
Sure, sure. So if you're listening to this and you can make it for Friday, I'm going to be doing a future self visioning breathwork, and it's at 12 noon EST. And you can sign up for that at soulbreathwork.com/gold. So you can sign up there. And then also, even if you can't make the time slot, still sign up, because the recording is going to be available through the weekend and into Monday. So you'll have access to that even if you can't make the time slot. So definitely do that. And also, if you want to have more breathwork in your pocket more often, Soul Breathwork lives and breathes in the App Store, and it's free to try for 7 days. So you get access to all the state changes and also the longer sessions too. Quick tip, if you want to do a longer session, Breathwork for Love is our most popular session. So I recommend starting there. And then otherwise, you can find me on Instagram at Iona Holloway, and I always love to hear from you.
Oh, great. And what is your website where people can find out about all the other wonderful things you're doing?
Sure. So I've got soulbreathwork.com, which is where all of my breathwork stuff lives. And then I'm also a creative inner work coach, where I work with mostly women and then also small business owners to really burn bright and be brave in their life and work. So you can actually find me at bravething.co as well. So that's my coaching side of things.
Okay, great. We'll put all of that in the show notes for everybody that's listening in and wants to learn more. Yes, of course. And one last question, kind of as we're wrapping up today. If you had an unlimited budget, what would you do to make the biggest impact on the health and welfare of the planet?
I would put soul in every single school. So it would be the Soul Cool Kids curriculum, and it would be something that all children got to do as part of their educate. I'm thinking primary school education, because in Scotland that's what we call it. But it would be that, and all children would have access to it, because if we were able to use these tools that young and they just grew, and we grew up with them embedded in our systems, I think we'd have a lot more grounded souls living in the world, making decisions on behalf of people, and building the world that we want to. So that's what I would do.
I love it. That sounds like a pretty easy one too. I think we can make that happen. So yes.
Yeah,
ding,
I've already started.
Oh, there you go.
Know,
Okay,
I've already started. I've already got my foot in some doors.
Nice.
But yeah, that on a global scale would be very exciting.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I was when I was in primary school, which would have been, I was 6. I think that's the same kind of correlation time period. And I was in Montessori school, and my mom was my teacher, and we did yoga in the classroom every day. And so I know that that's ingrained in me, and that relaxation was like, that's the piece. And so I know how important it is. And I can remember, like I have how those memories when you're a kid, it's like they're there, and I can be, and that's why I became a yoga teacher probably later in life, and love helping people with healing, because I saw how powerful it was at such a young age, even though of course I wasn't using it in that way, right? But now I use it differently for myself. But yes.
Yeah, such a cool skill to have at that age.
Yes,
Because
totally.
I grew up playing a lot of sport, so like using my body to do things. So I was in my body a lot, but it wasn't really a brain. Like it wasn't something that I was using to understand myself. It was just something that I was using to be good at sport. And I think those are very different things. Yeah.
Yes. I think people are realizing that more and more too. Well, thank you, Iona, for joining us today and teaching us all about the amazing aspects of breath work. I loved our conversation.
I did too. Thanks for having me.